Welcome, everyone. Today, we're jumping into a really important topic, environmental issues. And look, this isn't just about your exams. It's about really understanding the world we live in and the big challenges that we're all a part of. So, are you ready? Let's get started.
So let me start with a question for you. What in the world could possibly connect the traffic jam you're stuck in every morning with the Earth's ozone layer, which is miles and miles up in the sky? It sounds completely random, doesn't it? But here's the thing, they are connected. Pretty much all these environmental problems, from the little local ones to the giant global ones, are all tangled together. And today, we're going to untangle them.
So here's our game plan for today. We'll kick things off by looking at our planet's natural resources. Then, we'll dive into the big crisis of pollution. After that, we'll look up at the major threats facing our atmosphere. And finally, we'll zoom right back into our own cities. Oh, and definitely stick around for the quick summary at the end. It'll help you lock in all the key points.
All right, first up, our dwindling natural resources. Think about the basics that keep every single one of us alive. Clean air, fresh water, fertile soil. But there's a problem. All these things are under a huge amount of pressure. Let's find out why.
Okay, so let's get this key term down, resource degradation. It sounds complicated, but here's a simple way to think about it. Imagine our planet has a bank account full of resources. Nature's constantly making these slow, steady deposits into the account. But we humans, we're making withdrawals like there's no tomorrow. So when we use up things like forests and water way faster than nature can put them back, that's resource degradation.
So, what's really driving all of this? Well, you could say it's kind of a perfect storm. We have a growing population, which means we need more resources to support everyone. Sometimes our farming methods can be really hard on the land. We're clearing forests at a really scary pace. And of course, there's pollution. See the pattern here? It all comes back to human activities.
Now here's a perfect example of how one problem can lead directly to another. On the left you see deforestation, basically cutting down forests. Now think about tree roots. They're like a giant net holding all the soil in place. So what do you think happens when you take that net away? The soil gets loose, right? And that leads directly to what you see on the right, soil erosion, where all that good, fertile topsoil just gets washed or blown away. It's a classic domino effect.
And this is the really heartbreaking consequence of all this. When we destroy these natural places, we start to lose biodiversity, that incredible, amazing variety of life on our planet. And the scale of this problem is just wow. It's estimated that right now, about 1 million different species of plants and animals are at risk of going extinct forever. Just let that number sink in for a second. 1 million.
I know, that sounds incredibly bleak, doesn't it? But listen, there is some good news here. We do have solutions. We can farm in smarter ways that protect the soil. We can switch to clean energy, like solar and wind power. We can create protected areas for nature. We can be more mindful about how we use things. And maybe the most important tool of all, awareness. Just talking about these things and understanding them is the very first step.
Okay, moving on. Let's talk about the mess we humans tend to make. Our next big topic is the crisis of pollution. All the harmful stuff that we're releasing into our air, our water, and our soil.
So you can basically think of pollution coming in three main types. First, you've got air pollution. This is the stuff that comes from car exhaust pipes and factory smokestacks. Then you have water pollution. This can be anything from tiny microbes to harsh chemicals from farms and industries. And finally, there's soil pollution, which is what happens when we dump our trash and industrial waste right onto the land. Now, some pollutants are like the supervillains of this whole story. They're called persistent organic pollutants, or POPs for short, and the name tells you everything you need to know. They are persistent. They just don't go away. They can stick around in the environment for years and years, slowly building up in the food chain and causing serious health problems.
We all love our gadgets, right? Our phones, laptops, TVs. But if you ever stop to think about what happens when they get old or break, they become what's called e-waste. And as you can see from this chart, it's a huge pile of stuff. Half of it is iron and steel, and another big chunk is plastic. The really scary part, though, is that a lot of this e-waste isn't disposed of properly, and it can leak all kinds of toxic stuff into the ground.
So, how in the world do we clean up our act? Well, we can think of it as a four-step plan of attack. First, we educate people on the 3 R's: reduce, reuse, recycle. It's an old one, but it's a good one. Second, we need strong laws and fines to stop polluters. Third, we have to restore what we've damaged by planting more trees. And fourth, we've got to manage our waste in a much smarter, safer way.
All right, so far we've been focused on the ground. Now let's look up, way up.
Let's talk about our atmosphere, that protective blanket of air around our planet, because right now, it's in trouble. We're going to explore 3 huge threats: global warming, ozone depletion, and acid rain.
Okay, you've probably heard about global warming a million times, but let's look at the nitty-gritty. It's all about greenhouse gases trapping heat, but here's the kicker. Not all these gases are the same. This table shows what's called their global warming potential, or GWP. Just think of it as a heat-trapping score. We talk about carbon dioxide a lot, and we give it a score of 1. But now, look at methane. Its score is 25. And then you have these CFCs with a score of nearly 11,000. So it's not just about how much gas there is, it's about how powerful it is. Now, this is a huge global problem, right? So it's going to need a global solution. That's why countries from all over the world have been meeting for decades trying to figure this out together. From the Big Earth Summit back in 1992 to the Kyoto Protocol and more recently the Paris Agreement, we're seeing this slow but steady effort to work together for a cleaner future.
Next up, let's talk about the ozone layer. The best way to think about it is like a giant pair of sunglasses for planet Earth. It blocks out the sun's most harmful UV rays. But, as you can see in this picture from NASA, there's a hole in our planet's sunglasses, right over Antarctica. And this hole was created by man-made chemicals called ozone-depleting substances, or ODS, that used to be in things like spray cans and refrigerators.
And our last threat up in the atmosphere is something called acid rain. This diagram does a great job of showing exactly how it works. So look here. It all starts on the ground with pollution from factories and cars. This pollution rises up into the sky where it mixes with water in the clouds. Then, when it rains, it's not just water falling down, it's actually a weak acid. And this acid rain can do serious damage to forests, lakes, and even stone buildings.
Okay, for our final section, let's bring it all back home. We're going to look at our cities, the places where more and more of us are living, and really explore the environmental price we pay for all this urban growth.
One of the biggest issues with cities getting bigger is something called urban sprawl. It's a bit of a weird term, but just imagine a city that keeps spreading outwards and outwards, kind of like a giant ink stain on a map. That's urban sprawl. It means more houses, more roads, and a whole lot more cars, all just eating up the natural countryside.
And the fallout from this kind of growth? It's pretty huge. We're talking more pollution from all those cars, terrible traffic jams, and less space for wildlife to live. But you know, it's not just an environmental problem, it's a social problem too. Because often, it's the poorest communities that end up living in the most polluted areas, right next to the highways and the waste dumps. And that's just not right.
All right, that was a lot of information, I know, so let's do a super quick summary to make sure you've got the key points down. We started with resource degradation, how we're using up our planet's goodies too fast. Then, we talked about pollution in our air, water, and soil. We looked up at the big atmospheric threats, global warming, the ozone hole, and acid rain. And we finished by looking at our cities and the challenges of urban sprawl.
You know, these are some really big, complicated problems, and there are definitely no easy overnight solutions. But here's the thing, you can't solve a problem until you understand it. And now you have a much better understanding of the challenges we face. It's up to all of us to take this knowledge and use it to help build a healthier, more sustainable future. For more clear explanations and daily IGNO videos, subscribe to IGNO Mind Decoded.